Unfortunately, PFF's Black Friday sale is no longer going on, but we have a brand new discount to give you guys right now. That is a 30% off discount this holiday season with the promo code HOLIDAY30 to get 30% off a PFF Plus subscription. You get access to our player prop tool that can help you make back whatever you pay for PFF Plus and then some. It can also help you win a fantasy football championship this year. Get the same grades and analytics that every single NFL team uses and every single college football team uses as well. And you get access to the best mock draft simulator on the planet for the 2026 NFL Draft. Again, Holiday 30 to get 30% off a PFF Plus subscription right now. Texas Tech against BYU in the Big 12 championship game at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Texas Tech looking to secure a first-round bye in the college football playoff, while BYU is fighting for its playoff lives right now. Texas Tech and BYU are each playing in their first Big 12 championship games this Saturday. And also, like I said, a game with huge playoff implications. If the Red Raiders win this game, they'll most likely secure a first-round bye in the playoff with a 12-1 record overall. Even though BYU is 11-1, and I'm sure both Dalton and I would agree they should be in the playoff right now because they're not ranked that way by the committee. We'll see what they do tonight, but right now they're not ranked that way by the committee. They pretty much have to win this game against Texas Tech to clinch a playoff spot, leave no doubt, make it the playoff. Because again, at 11-2, even though Dalton and I might disagree with it and say they should be in the playoff, still at 11-2, the committee will not put them in. At 11-2. They need to win this game against Texas Tech. Again, these two teams met back in Week 11 a few weeks ago. Texas Tech cruised to a 29-7 victory at home in this game.
I think we've got just a fascinating situation here, especially with the way I'm assuming BYU is going to stay at number 11 in these rankings. There was everybody in front of them, one except for A&M, and they're not falling that far. If BYU wins, we've got a fascinating situation because I wouldn't think that Texas Tech would drop all the way out, especially having beaten BYU already once, and their one loss was to an Arizona State team that has been ranked at times this year. But where does that leave then? Alabama? If they lose, where does that leave Notre Dame there at number 9? Say if Alabama and BYU both win or so, and then we get the Miami situation. This really is – I know Texas Tech is pretty heavily favored, but if BYU wins, there could be massive consequences right around that at-large bubble that makes this game really interesting.
If BYU wins, I think what will happen is if Georgia also wins, and I'm not agreeing with this, but I think they'll kick out Alabama. I think it's what they're going to do. If BYU wins and Georgia wins, they would leave Notre Dame in for whatever reason, and Bama will be out. I think that's what would happen. But if Bama wins,
here's the thing.
Bama wins, then it's Notre Dame on the chopping block.
Here's your other problem. The weirdest situation is if one of them wins and the other one doesn't, because the suspense for weeks has been, how close are we getting Miami to Notre Dame? And if there's a spot where one wins and the other doesn't, and say they move, let's say BYU gets beat the same way they did last time, right? And Alabama wins. Okay, Alabama beat Georgia, they're jumping ahead of Notre Dame. They're going to be number 10. If BYU moves down, that's going to put Miami at number 11. You're going to have something, I don't know what, decide which of those two teams is the last team in.
Yep.
This SEC one and the Big 12 one are extremely consequential. I don't think in all likelihood they're safe, but boy, you get to have some sort of argument if one wins. If both of them win, then you're right. Notre Dame's just going to be outright. And you're going to get Alabama, you're going to get BYU, and they'll all be in some order in there. But if only one of them does, I think that might actually be worse for Notre Dame, considering they don't want Miami inching closer to them with that argument, because we know there's been some loud arguments about it.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of arguments about it. And I had the take on Twitter I posted yesterday. Some people disagree with it. And of course you could disagree with it. I get it. I had the take of, hey, if you make it to conference title weekend, you should not be able to move down. Whatever happens, you can't be moved down out of the playoff. I think you have earned the right to play in this game. If you win, you can move up. You got to play this game as a reward for what you did all season. there should not be a punishment attached to losing this game. That's my personal take on this. That's what happened last year with SMU. They didn't move out of the playoff even after they lost to Clemson. And Alabama, ironically, was left out because of that decision. I think it would be a horrible look if Alabama got left out last year and then they changed their way of thinking and Alabama gets left out this year for losing to Georgia. We'll get to that game later on and who we actually next and who we'll predict in that game. But that's my thinking is, hey, if you play in conference title weekend, you can, of course, move up, but you cannot get kicked out of the playoff for losing a conference title game.
And to me, Alabama missed the playoff last year, one, because they lost to Oklahoma, first and foremost. But it's not because SMU was selected to go in. It's because Clemson won and stole a spot.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it really – if SMU had won, they would have got in anyway as the ACC champ, and Bama would have been the last team in. They should be mad at Clemson more than anybody for going and winning that game. But, but look, they get a shot at redemption this year. That's another subject. But I don't know that the committee feels that way because they have said over and over it is another data point, not something that is separate from the rest of what they've seen. So if you're BYU, you have to go in here – especially already being number 11.
They have to win.
They have to win. They're going to have to win.
There's no other.
Whether it's a bad precedent and that we disagree with or not, that BYU has to win this football game.
Yeah, exactly. Texas Tech, of course, win. You get a first-round bye. Lose. There's a chance Texas Tech moves out of the home playoff entirely and maybe has to go on the road, potentially.
That I could see. You get into debates with Oklahoma.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but there's a chance I would say.
You get into debates with Oklahoma, Notre Dame. They would be behind BYU at that point. Yeah. I would think BYU probably get a game at Lavelle Edwards there, man, if they were to win this one. But no, this is a fascinating matchup, especially with as lopsided as we saw the first time.
Definitely. All right, let's get to the actual preview of the game right now, Dalton. You have the Texas Tech offense in this game. What should we know for that matchup?
So I think something I noticed watching the first game is Texas Tech. They've been great running the football all season, but I think something that jumps out. Now, they run inside zone runs as much as their most common run concept, somewhere I think 43 to 45% of the time. But they're actually more effective when they mix it up a little bit. They get into these gap schemes, run a little bit of these counter schemes, pulling guards, pulling tight ends all over the place. I think two guys that are really important to this offense are the tight ends, Terrence Carter and John Carlos Miller. They're really good lead blockers. They really allow runs to bounce to the edge. A lot of times they're on power schemes. They'll get a little bit of two tight end duo going up front. What does that do? I think it allows their offensive line to get downhill to the second level a little bit quicker, and it allows them to create leverage on one side of the formation in the run game. And I think this was something that BYU struggled with. First of all, in that game, gap scheme runs, Texas Tech, 20 carries, 135 yards. Pretty darn good there, 6.8 yards per carry. For the season, Texas Tech, when they run gap schemes, all right, 7th in rushing grade, 16th in yards per carry. BYU against gap schemes, this is not the only game they struggled, 104th in run defense grade, 99th in yards per carry allowed. I believe it's 5.3 yards per carry allowed. When they see gap schemes, what that tells me when I watch them is BYU's getting leverage to one side of the formation too often against these schemes, especially against these counter schemes. Their linebackers, and we've put them in the spotlight a lot, but their linebackers did not play their best game in the first game against Texas Tech. Isaiah Glasker, Jack Kelly, Siale Acera. Spotlight on you three. I know I've done it before. I did it in the Cincinnati game, and you guys were really good. But it's those three guys coming up, reading laterally, getting around second-level blocks from the offensive line, engaging these two tight ends and stuffing plays in the hole and attacking outside in, not allowing Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams to bounce outside with these gap schemes, especially the counter schemes when they're coming around the edge. You can't let them get outside or then Texas Tech is really dangerous. Those are the three guys, once again, as we often are for this BYU defense that I'm watching, Glasker, Kelly, Acera, against these gap run schemes for Texas Tech. If they get that going and they get in good down and distance situations where you can't then blitz Baron Morton, you can't use the man coverage you want to use against the receivers, which I actually think worked reasonably well the first time they played. I don't think BYU's secondary played that bad a game the first time they played. Baron Morton had a passing grade in the 50s in that game. You can get to Baron Morton if you get him in obvious passing situations, but those linebackers, I think, are in the spotlight, and they have to be really good on first and second down against these schemes, the offensive line and the tight ends.
Yeah, I'm looking at the trenches for my matchup on BYU's side. BYU's offensive line against Texas Tech's defensive line, because both the the BYU offense and the Texas Tech defense, they're built around the trenches. You see that graphic right there. BYU against Texas Tech in Week 11, they struggled in the trenches. Their third worst offensive line grade all year, 67 rushing yards only, season low, and they allowed 5 combined sacks or hits, really quarterback knockdowns. Actually, all 5 of them were hits. That's a season high, though, of knockdowns for BYU in that game. But BYU overall this year has been really good with their offensive line. 74.7 offensive line grade is third in the Big 12, and they're 10th in the country with a 73.5 run blocking grade. That's helped a star running back in LJ Martin run for over 1,200 rushing yards this year and help keep a true freshman quarterback in Bear Bachmeier upright, which has helped him to have an 82.3 PFF grade. That's the highest among all true freshman quarterbacks this year. But like I said before, as good as that front 5 has been all year, it was no match for Texas Tech's defensive line in their matchup, because Texas Tech leads the country with a 93.6 defensive line grade this year. Their edge rusher, David Bailey, leads the nation with 70 pressures. Another edge rusher in Romello Height is second in the country with a 92.6 PFF grade. A.J. Holmes Jr. is second among all Power 4 D tackles with an 84.4 grade. And Lee Hunter is ninth among all Power 4 D tackles with an 80.8 PFF grade. So really all 4 of Texas Tech's starting defensive linemen are in the top 10 of the country or in the top 10 of the Power 4 in PFF grade at their position this year. And like I said, the Cougars got dominated in the trenches back in that Week 11 game. If that happens again, I don't see a world where BYU pulls off the upset and clinches a playoff spot. They have to play better in the trenches in this game, or else Texas Tech most likely will run away with this game again.
I think something I might consider if I were BYU, because you could feel in the first game, obviously they want to start running the football early in the game and establish dominance in the trenches, but you could feel in the first game that they were trying to hide Bachmeier. They were trying to hide him, right? And I don't think that can be the case if you're trying to win this conference and you're trying to go to the playoff. I almost wonder, BYU runs their offense at a relatively average tempo when it comes to offensive plays per game. But I almost wonder if you want to come out and speed things up a little bit. Let Bachmeier get in a rhythm. Loosen this defense up a little bit. Because if they come out and play number 1 and 2 and just run their usual stretch and they get 2 yards and it's 3rd and 6 against this pass rush, it could look early a lot like the game we saw the first time in Lubbock. And I think one of the themes for BYU this year at times has been a little bit of slow starts, right? You think about this game. You think about the Iowa State game. You think about the Arizona game. I think there have been times when they've just tried to kind of establish their offensive line, establish their run game, and work in sequence. And I know it's a gamble a little bit that you'd be taking, but I wonder if you work out of sequence a little bit and let Bachmeier just fire off. Let's go. Let's take some shots early and show you we're not afraid, and then we'll get back and get heavy with the tight ends in the offensive line and get in the run game. Because LJ Martin's getting 30 touches in this game regardless, right? That's going to happen one way or the other. I think maybe a little less predictability early in the game. Even they got off to a slow start last week against UCF. I think a little bit less predictability early in the game. If Bear Bachmeier is that dude, and he showed at times that he is, let it fly in the first quarter then. Because what else? I mean, if you come out the same way you did in the first game, this defense is going to shut you down. The D-line, Jacob Rodriguez, the whole thing, they're one of the best defenses in the country. I think I might mix it up a little bit if I'm the Cougars offensively. I would.
Yeah, I would agree with that, honestly. All right, Dalton. Ultimately, who will win the Big 12 championship? Will Texas Tech clinch a first-round bye in the playoff with a win over BYU and remove any hope that BYU has of probably making the playoff this year? Or will BYU win and send 2 teams from the Big 12 to the college football playoff?
I thought BYU's defense played actually not a bad game the first time around. They just kind of ran out of gas because their offense couldn't find any momentum. I think you're going to get another defensive, hard-hitting game. There's a lot of studs on the defensive side of the ball in this game for both sides. I'm still a little bit worried about A, the slow starts, and B, Texas Tech being one of the few teams, really you could argue the only team that's really stopped. Did they have, one explosive run that entire game? If I remember the stat from that Sunday show that we had, I think it was one explosive run the entire game.
I mean, only 6-7 rushing yards total, so yeah, I'm guessing that.
And I believe that one explosive run was the very first carry of the day, if I remember that right, from LJ, like a 12-yard run from LJ. I mean, obviously they have to get the run game going, but I think they would have to play it a little bit backwards. I'm still worried about this might just be the one really bad matchup for BYU in conference, at least, and Texas Tech. They're the most physical team in the conference. I think BYU is going to play better, though. I think it's going to be better. Remember, they had the Parker Kingston muff punt, too, that really put them in a bad spot early, and they fell behind early in that game. I also think this game being neutral instead of, although Arlington isn't too far away, it's probably going to be heavy Texas Tech. But we've seen the BYU fans travel.
They travel.
We've seen that ourselves. Yeah. I'm going to take Texas Tech. I think a better game than last time. I think their defense wins the day. If BYU's going to win, they've got to force Morton into obvious passing situations and into mistakes, because he can make mistakes under pressure now. We've known that his whole career. But Red Raiders 24, Cougars 17. I think Texas Tech just has a little bit more on defense. They are a real problem on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm going to actually probably please a lot of BYU fans with my prediction right here, because they got mad at me whenever I picked BYU to win the game. But I'm actually picking Texas Tech to win this game.
You broke the curse in person.
I did break it in person. I did break it in person.
I don't know if you did a little ritual in the press box.
They were still yelling at me from the stands saying, you never pick BYU again. So, I'm not doing it. I'm picking Texas Tech to win this game 34-24. It won't be as lopsided as the game a month ago, but I think the Red Raiders will win their first Big 12 championship thanks to their elite trench play over BYU by a final score of 34-24 over the BYU Cougars. All right,